say, oh, Norse are these people that speak this language. Again, we really can't. So for tonight, we're going to have to kind of organize ourselves into what I would call a bit of a compromise. So when I'm going to say Norse, like the Norse, which below me, a Norse is a Norse, of course. Almost one of the potential titles for tonight's stream. I, by the way, always try to make the stream some sort of pun. So tonight it is Go West, Norseman, which is a pun off the very famous Horace Greeley quote, Go West, young man, referring to Manifest Destiny in the United States. So we also thought about straight from the Norse's mouth, because the majority of Norwegian history that we are going to be talking about tonight from the old part is stuff that was passed down orally. I was thinking about immigrant song spelled with an E, like those people that leave an area, which was kind of a double layer pun because the original song, Immigrant Song by Led Zeppelin, is about Vikings. So there was a potential double level entendre there. We settled on this one. For those of you that don't know, I also very frequently lean on my mods in the channel to assist me with goofy puns and song title references and things like that for stream titles. So I came up with that one by myself, but it was Shane selected and group approved. Don't look a miffed Norse in the mouth. These people are pretty broad-shouldered and pretty strapping young gents, so yeah, I would not suspect that you would want to spend much time doing dental work on them, especially in the ancient world, where dental work is usually involving chisels and not so fun stuff, big pairs of pliers and things. Ancient dental work is just as scary as modern dental work, but we have, stuff that we can use to knock ourselves out. Good old Novocaine. So when we were talking about Norse for tonight, what we're going to talk about, and again, this is a bit of a compromise, we're going to be referring to people that live mostly here along this southern and western coast of the peninsula that are speaking the Old Norse Western dialect. So this is not a perfect descriptor, but I think that with enough recognition, we can use it fairly comfortably, and I don't think anybody would get offended at this. So later on, when the kingdom, of course, unifies, then it's, again, much easier to determine who's Norwegian and who isn't, because if you don't live there, well, we'll talk about that later on. So it is important for us to talk a little bit about their own histories, the stories that these people tell about themselves, where they come from, how they got to where they were, their big heroes, their big battles, their big victories. And most of these are recorded much, much later in books called sagas. Originally, these would have been orally remembered, memorized, usually sung in some sort of verse, perhaps to music, or recited aloud as poetry. But these sagas are an oral history of these people, and there are lots of them. There are sagas from just this kind of general region here in Northern Europe. There are sagas from Iceland, sagas from Greenland, all sorts of different stories. But they aren't really written down until the earliest in the late 900s AD, but most of them aren't really written down even until the early 1000s AD. So they are recording events that happened hundreds of years in the past. And while we can't just discount these out of hand and go, oh, these are 300-year-old stories, they're all just garbage. I mean, you can't do that, right? We do have to take a certain amount of skepticism. And there is a such thing as a healthy skepticism, right? It's not just, I don't believe any of it. An unhealthy level of skepticism is, I'm looking at data, and I'm looking at, okay, I'm not going to get off on this backtrack. I was about to get on a bit of a quasi-soapbox here and make a reference to the recent American national election. But I think I'm going to avoid that. I'm going to stop myself ahead of time. So, there we are. So we have to understand that some of these stories might not be accurate. And that's okay, because there are lots of disagreements between the sagas. So it's pretty clear that these people fought quite a bit amongst themselves, and that's going to create enemies, and that's going to create bias. So in some of these sagas, you're going to have people that are saying, this guy is the guy that did that thing. But then you read another saga, and you go, no, it's this guy that did that thing. So you have to understand that they're a little bit different in some places, and they are a lot different in some places. And another thing, we can't always take these Viking sagas, and I just said Viking and I knew I wasn't supposed to, these Norse sagas, and compare them to other contemporary historical stuff and get good data. And that doesn't mean that they're wrong, again, but if we were to find a saga of Iceland, and it mentions these people doing these things, and then we were to find a history in England that recounted the exact same thing, this is going to give us a more sound basis to work towards, right? We can't just go, oh yeah, this one guy said it, so it's got to be true. They were embellished just a little bit. Of course they were embellished just a little bit. All history is written down by biased people. I'm a biased individual. I try my best not to be, but everybody's got a bias. Every single human on the face of the earth has a bias. And if you just had a moment where you go, oh, I don't have a bias. Guess what? You thought that because you have a bias. You thought, that guy can't say that about me. I'm clearly not biased. Well, the thought that you had that is, yeah, it's kind of a bias. So everybody's got one, and that's okay. I'm not trying to say it's a negative thing. We just have to recognize these things, right? Everybody has to understand that the way that we view the world is different than everybody else because nobody's had the exact same experiences that we have. And that's okay, right? Even fabric has a bias. I am the most objective ever. Correct. I will remind everybody of the official stream fortune. Let me see if I can get it. By the way, I have lots of little props, and they're just sort of scattered about here on the table. One of my themes of the show is that human beings are way more alike than we are different. And I found completely non-biased support for my belief in a fortune cookie, and I saved it, and I show it all the time on stream. What does it say? Whoop, 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 whoop. Focus. We all have a lot more in common than it seems. And this came out of a fortune cookie, so it's gotta be true. 100% gotta be true. Boom. You can't fight with the cookie. Cookie wisdom? Exactly. The fates are aligned. So, we have to take these sagas at a little bit of a tilt, and that's okay. So, sagas, they're cool. And by the way, you can read most of these. They've been translated into lots of different languages. And you can read this stuff on the internet. A lot of these big sagas have been posted on the net, which is one of the great things about the internet. As opposed to, never mind. I have never tried to fight with a cookie, and I don't think that I will start today. This is a wise decision. If you fight with a cookie, what happens if it beats you? I love tea. Cast runes. Right. Okie dokie. Oh, Vern figured out how to do Unicode and has been typing things in Viking runes in the Discord, which I am incredibly jealous of. Hey, Cave Geek, how's it going? For those of you, as always, that do not know, you should be following Cave Geek. He makes maps on leather with tools and traditional methods, and it's pretty cool. And plays video games every now and then. Good to see you, my friend. Mostly gonna lurk. Got a remote training session. Lurk away. I hope that the dulcet tones of my voice do not detract from your training session. Hey, Destiny, how's it going? Yes, go follow Cave Geek. Over there. Nope, over there. Should be somewhere like maybe here-ish. I can't tell. Just click the follow button. Okay, so let's talk about the Norse old period. And when I talk about the old period, I'm going to be talking about this period of time that people from Scandinavia are going to be traveling around the rest of Europe. And this is going to lead them outside of their natural homeland and down into all of these areas. And this is going to start around 790 AD or so. And they're mostly going to be moving south and west, which of course brings us to Go West, Norseman. So the earliest targets for these raids, which mostly they are raids, are going to be the northern coast of Europe here and the coastlines of England and Ireland. And most of these are going to be raids looking for stuff. And when I say stuff, I mean stuff like, loot, food, slaves, anything that's not nailed down, and some stuff that is. So you're going to see these raids moving around, and this is partially because of a pretty big climactic event that's called the Little Ice Age, which kicks up a little bit. Yes, they were brought on by the Little Ice Age. Thank you, Brittany McInnes. This is the benefit of hanging around in my house. You hear about all of these historical things, and my dear sweet wife is perpetually inundated by random historical knowledge. I apologize sometimes. Anyway, so yes, it is the Little Ice Age. The region of Scandinavia is getting colder, and their farmland area is shrinking. You listen occasionally. I appreciate that you always act like you're listening, even if you're in your head going... Anyway, the people are moving around because they're looking for places to go, places to find extra food. Their population has been condensed geographically. Some of them need to go looking at stuff. Shane beatboxing album win. We've talked about this before. That was rather imprecise. Yes, Becca, Brittany is my wife. I'm strangely good at many random things, and beatboxing is one of them. I'm just a weird guy. But I like myself. Probably too much, if there is such a thing. So, what's going to cause the really big migrations? There's a difference between raiding and migrating. If I'm just going over to England to grab a bunch of stuff, put it in my boat, and sail back home, that's different than going, I should probably go there and live. You knew you signed up regarding historical facts when you married a historian. Fair enough, she did. And she puts up with me through thick and thin. And by the way, I know that a lot of people have what I would consider perhaps an over positive viewpoint of my level of intelligence. I will tell you that my wife is significantly smarter than I am. My wife is brilliant. She can do calculus in her head level smart. And she's going to be like, why are you talking about me on stream like that? Because she's also very humble. Yeah, what else? Well, it could just be that I'm a really good salesman, because I'm a charismatic guy, and I can convince people to perhaps throw in for things that they normally would not do. She is. And she's beautiful. Beautiful. Or I'm really bad at calculus. I took calculus when I was in college, and I made an A in it. I just hated every second of it. So, there we are. Anyway. So some things are going to start happening over in our Norwegian region. And this is going to start with a guy named Harold Fairhair. And I just so happen to have a photo of Harold Fairhair. Look at that guy. Man, that looks like a king right there. Check out his wicked cool crown. Big old crown. So this is Harold Fairhair. And somewhere in the middle to late 800s, the original blonde. Right. Somewhere around the middle 800s, Harold is going to unify Norway into one kingdom. And this is going to cause some people to get a little bit uncomfortable because not all of them are going to line up with the way that he wants to really kind of run the show. And so we're going to start seeing people leaving Norway looking for new homes. And some of them are going to end up over in England and Ireland. He's an okay king, no bracelet. Yeah. No wrist wear. So you're going to find people that are going to start looking around for new places to go. And one of these areas is a place that I would so love to visit. Oh my gosh, I want to go here so bad. They are called the Faroe Islands. Not spelled like Pharaoh. These little guys, they are spelled like this. There we are, the Faroe Islands. Accurate. Oop, I can't click on that screen. I have to click on this screen. So the Faroe Islands. Look at here. Super, super beautiful place. Question. Why would he be called the fair-haired specifically when that's a generally widespread genetic disposition of the people there? Or was it just different? Oh, no. He was called fair-haired because he was just good-looking guy. Like, ooh, look at that. He's got the coif. He's got the good-looking stuff. He's actually more brunette than he was blonde. But there we are. So these are the Faroe Islands. They are a small collection of islands in the northern part of the Atlantic, roughly equidistant between the shores of Norway and Iceland. And these areas are going to be first explored by a guy named Grimur Kamban. Yeah, and I could try to type out all of these people's names, but just to be honest with you, I can't always remember how to do the funny little symbol stuff, and I don't mean funny as in, look at how dumb that language is. I mean non-English thing that I can't remember how to do. So I'm going to copy and paste some of these people, which is normally not my thing to do, but I have myself a nice little document here because I have a problem talking and typing already. So Grimur Kamban. This is a Norse guy who had left Norway because of Harold's unification. He and Harold had not really gotten along very well. So Grimur is going to go looking for somewhere else to find, to bring up his family and live and love. So he's going to get blown off of course and end up over in the Faroe Islands. So there we are. And when he brings in his people, these are the first Viking settlers there. Now, these are not the first people in the Faroe Islands. It seems as if there were some monks of the Catholic faith that had arrived there earlier, perhaps a couple hundred years earlier, maybe. The archaeological remains are pretty scant. Ooh, man, I am way behind in the chat. Traveling with a historian would be so cool. I'll put a bookmark on that and come back to it at the end of the discussion. Your Hubs is always just making stuff up and said he read it somewhere. It's great until you go to the 100th cathedral in Italy. Aw, we didn't go to 100. We went to like 20-something. The story in Norway goes that he vowed not to cut his hair until he had unified Norway. There we go. Oh, pretty interesting point. True that, at least only 100. There are way more. And I would literally go to all of them. Yes, I did. The monks most likely came from Ireland or Scotland. Monks don't procreate, so where would they replenish their people from? The Catholic populations of Ireland and Scotland. The Irish especially were big on putting monasteries out on islands, because if you're going to go with the recluse version of things, what's more reclusive than this weird island in the middle of the ocean that's 500 miles away from the nearest piece of land? So there we are. Oh, trust me, Vern, I've already got a lot of exploration figured out on how to get to the Faroe Islands. They're technically controlled by Denmark. They have their own language, which is Old Norse related. The language that they speak in the Faroe Islands today is related from this western branch of the Old Norse language, which again is sort of what we are calling Norse tonight. So we're going to start seeing Norse settlements pop up in the Faroe Islands. And Grimur Kamban is, of course, the leader of that. But they don't just stop there, because guess what? There's more stuff. That's right. The Atlantic is a big old place. Yep. And a guy named Nadod, which is one of the greater names of tonight. Nadod. Nadod the Norse. He gets blown off course as he is trying to sail around, and he spots this new island. Oh. There's more. Now, he doesn't, of course, immediately go there because he's already been blown off of course, but he comes back to the Faroes, and he gets back out to the island eventually, and he calls it Snowland because, well, it's covered in snow. But wait, there's more. That's right. So he doesn't settle there. It's covered with snow. He comes back to the Faroes, but people start hearing, hey, there's another big island out there. Maybe we should go check it out. And before long, there is another, I guess, discovery, finger quote, question mark, of Iceland by a guy named Garðar Svarvarsson. Yeah. Oh, did I not post that the right way? There we are. Garðar Svarvarsson. This guy gets blown off, of course, and ends up in Iceland, and he decides that he wants to figure out how big the island is in the first place, so he decides to sail all the way around it. So he kind of gets the gist of how big the island is, but it's that land that Nadod called Snowland, and we don't necessarily want to stay there forever, so he makes a camp and stays through the winter, because just to be honest, the northern Atlantic is not the best place to be sailing in the winter, because there are these big icebergs, and it's really cold, and there are storms, which is how he got blown off, of course, in the first place. So he doesn't stay forever. He goes back to the Faroes, but then there's another guy, and this is going to be the man that is sort of credited with founding the settlements on Iceland, and his name is Ingolfur Arnarsson. Yeah, buddy. But wait, Snowland. Yeah, it's not Iceland yet. This starts changing, of course, eventually. Great names, absolutely. I love these names. So I can show you a picture of this guy. Well, rephrase, I can show you a statue of this guy. Oop. I forgot to show you this guy. What year are we in? That is a great question. Arnarsson does his first settlement in Iceland in 874 AD. So what we're looking at right here is a modern farmhouse in Iceland, but it is built in the same sort of way that the Vikings... I keep saying Vikings. I said I wasn't going to say Vikings. This partially comes from the fact that when I teach in my 101 World Civ class, I don't always have the amount of time needed to make fine distinctions of things, and I have to make generalizations, which I don't really care to do in specific, but I'm also trying to teach about 280,000 years of human history in one semester, so it's a little messy. But this is a Norse settlement farm in Iceland that would look very similar to the way that they would have originally lived. They really liked doing the turf up against the walls and on the ceiling. Of course, this is going to be really great for insulation when it gets really cold outside. We should have a Viking jar. Yeah. Curses. Proceeds will go towards travel to the Faroes. Well, in that case, I'll just say it like 95,000 times. It wouldn't cost that much. Plane tickets are pretty expensive. They're like $1,800, but you have to change planes about 4 times to get up there. Anyway, so this is what a Norse settlement would have looked like. But this guy, this is Ingolfur Arnarsson. And this statue is in Iceland today if you go visit. Of course, it's probably not what he actually looked like, but it's one of the only photos that I could see that I thought would be kind of cool to show. I always try to find ancient pictures of people. It's hard to find that a lot. So I try to find things that are as close to what I would think would be accurate as possible. At least it doesn't have horns on his helmet. Yeah, that's Wagner. That guy. Oh, Wagner. Yeah, the whole horned Viking thing, helmet, that's mostly from operas made in Europe. Dinner. You go do your dinner thing, Becca. Okay, so Ingolfur Arnason is that guy who first makes a settlement in Iceland. This is going to be one more step in the way, but wait, there's more. Because we're moving closer. What about this thing over here? Well, this is Greenland. And it turns out that people get blown off course. If you're developing a pattern here of, well, they seem to not necessarily be exploring, they just seem to be getting blown off course all the time. That's kind of how it worked. Gunnbjorn Ulfsson. Yeah, this is the Norse guy that supposedly was the first one to sight Greenland. He was sailing from Norway to Iceland. You get blown off course all the time, too. Don't we all? Isn't it a metaphor for life? Where you get blown off of course and you don't necessarily find what you were looking for, but that doesn't mean there's nothing out there. Maybe you just need to explore just a little bit more outside of your comfort zone and you might find something cooler. This is wisdom. Anyway, Gunnbjorn Ulfsson gets blown off of course and he spots this new big series of land shapes out in the distance. Not all who wander are lost. There we go. Marshall, Will, and Holly must have been of Norse descent. Deep Thoughts by Shane. Hashtag Deep Thoughts. We all just need to accept our inner Viking. I have, like, genetically speaking, inner Viking. And I don't have to put dollars in the Viking jar because I'm using this as a generalized Scandinavian term. My family on my mother's side and my father's side have lines that trace back to Scandinavians, specifically to Normans. I am related to Rollo the Viking. I don't know how many people know who that guy is. He was the guy that basically strong-armed the Carolingian kings of France into giving up this big chunk of northern France called Normandy, and then also blackmailing him into marrying his child daughter. So that part, not so cool about people in my family history, but probably not the worst thing people in my family have done in the past. I had family that lived in the South during the pre-Civil War period of time, so yeah, slaves. Not something that I'm proud of my heritage, but something that I have to live with, so there we are. Too much about Shane. So Gunnbjorn comes back and says, hey, there's more land out there. We should go check out what's going on. And some people do. And I will be honest, this one's hard for me to try to pronounce. Snæbjorn Galti Holmsteinsen. This is the Norse guy that decides that he's going to go to Greenland for the first time on purpose. And I believe Snæbjorn is the correct way to pronounce that. Or maybe Snæbjorn. My Norwegian and Swedish pronunciation skills are not top-notch. I will admit that. So this guy is going to go to Greenland and hang out. He tries to set up snowboard. Oh, it means snow bear. There we go. See, this is why it's great to have an international community, because I can say Snæbjorn and people go, hey, that means snow bear. And that's awesome. Thank you for that. Doing things on purpose. Woo! Right? So they try to make a settlement in Greenland, and this is in 978 AD, but it doesn't last. They stay a couple of seasons. It gets really, really windy and really cold. They didn't have a large population to begin with, so they end up going back to Iceland. But then some interesting stuff happens. Oh, and by the way, they do bring with them Christianity, because at this point, the Norse people had accepted Christianity. And I have a really neat picture to show you. This is a Christian church from Greenland. It's at a place called Hvalsey. And it is one of the oldest Christian churches in North America. And it might be the oldest Christian church in North America. There's a little bit of a debate about whether or not this was built during the Norse period or much later. I don't know where I come down in the debate. According to the internets, Kyle means slender. Well, that's accurate. For those of you that don't know, Kyle's a slender guy. Not skinny. There's a difference between skinny and slender. He's a cool guy, too. You should hang out with Kyle. He's a nice dude. Anyway, this is Hvalsey Church, and it's really old, and it could be the first Christian church in North America. And you'll notice that I'm now saying North America because let us all remember that Greenland here is North America. So at this point, the Norse have arrived in North America. And this is 978. So what's up with all the 1492 Columbus sailed the ocean blue thing? Well, it turns out that's blatantly wrong. Well, I mean, he did sail in 1492, but Columbus was not the first European that set foot on North American soil. He was over 500 years late. It is propaganda. Well, it's also because of cultural and regional differences. So if you'll remember me telling you, the sagas are not really written down until much later in the 1000s or 1100s AD. And many people in southern and central and eastern and western Europe looked at the histories of the Norsemen or the Scandinavian peoples as somewhat lesser. There was a definite cultural bias against these people. Northern Europe was not settled as soon as Southern Europe was. You did not see big ancient civilizations like Rome or Greece come out of the northern part of Europe. And that's not to detract from these people. They had a much rougher time of living up there. And so when we get to histories from the north, even back in the medieval period, there was a lot of bias against these sagas. And a lot of people in Europe utterly thought that they were just completely made up. Columbus was the first civilized man to sail. Yeah, civilized. I'm glad you put that in the quotes there, because that dude was far from it. Kind of a jerk, that Columbus guy. Scribalists, yeah. I don't think Kyle is the slender man. No. I'm taller than he is, so he's not 9 foot tall and super skinny. He's also not an internet meme, so there we go. But this means that the histories of Northern Europe do not get circulated as much. They do not get as much attention, nor do they get as much scholarly attention once we get to later periods of time where we start founding big universities and things of that nature. So it was not until, well, let me put a bookmark right there, and we'll come right back to that. So Shane Slenderman confirmed. You can call me what you want. I wish I were more slender. I'm kind of chunky man right now. This guy is Eric the Red, and you can't tell from his awesome little suit here. He's called the Red because he's redheaded. Now, Eric is a bit of a brawler. And he lived in Iceland. And he ended up killing a guy. And it didn't go over so great with his local population. So he got kicked out of the colony in Iceland. And he traveled around a little while, and he decided, you know what? I'm going to go over to Greenland. We know what's over there. people have been over there. I'm going to go make myself some colonies over in Greenland. So this is Eric the Red. And he is going to be responsible for the first permanent settlement in Greenland in 982 AD. Oh, those ginger-headed dudes. Aren't we all chunkier than we wish? Perhaps. I don't know. Let me guess. He missed Greenland? No, he actually got there. He got there. He established himself a permanent colony. And for quite some time, there were going to be two big colonies of Greenland. There's going to be one over here in the southeast, and there's going to be one over here in the west. And these are going to be called Eastern and Western Greenland colonies. And these are pretty successful, even by what we might consider, colonization efforts. This is a pretty organized group. They have stable populations, and they meet the native peoples, because Greenland had native peoples living there, people that are roughly related to the Native American tribes of the Inuit, other groups that are sort of related to the Algonquin tribes. And they're going to trade pretty fairly. And they're actually going to make a significant amount of money from trading in ivory. You're going to have things like walruses and scrimshaw, whale bones up there that are going to be sort of prized possessions in Europe. And for a little while, this is going to make them a nice, tidy income. So, seems like he has a pretty nice go of things. But there are going to be more people, because we're not done yet. So Eric has got himself some settlements going, but there's about to be an interesting development here. Bjarni Hrolfsson. This guy was a trader. Like, he traded stuff. Ah, yes, that lucrative walrus trade. He is sailing around Greenland, and he gets blown off course. Go figure. We need a blow-off course jar. If you get blown off course and you're searching around in the northern Atlantic, put $1 in the jar. And he's going to end up landing over here. Now, that's Baffin Island, and that's Canada. Scrimshaw plus whalebones equals superpowers. There we good. Yeah, feels Nordic, man. According to the documentary Dishonored. I need to play the second one. I've played the first one and really enjoyed it. I haven't played the second one. And I know I have it. I appreciate that, by the way. I need to go ahead and play that pretty soon. I was trying to wait for the DLC to go on sale to where I could buy it pretty cheap and then just play both of them back to back, but I don't think that's going to happen. So, is it Death of the Outsider? It's still running at like $20 for a DLC that's just too much. Too much. So, Bjarni gets blown off course and lands Bjarni also Bear. There we go. Death of the Outsider is standalone? Oh, did not know that. I thought you had to have two to play it. Well, thank you for clarifying that. Learn something new every day. So old Bjarni's going to sail over here to Canada. And he doesn't really like what he sees because the land looks really rocky. And this is probably over here on the coast of Baffin Island, which is this big thing right here. So he's going to turn back around and go back to Greenland, but he's going to start talking to Eric's son, who is a guy named Leif Erikson. Go figure. I tried to look for a good picture of Leif, and I was sadly disappointed. But I did find a neat statue of the guy. This is a pretty cool statue of Leif Erikson. There we go. And he is going to make a point to go over to this new area. And he pretty clearly explores several different regions of this northern Atlantic zone. And he doesn't really have good maps What point in time is this? Great question. This is in the late 980s. So Bjarni is going to sail in 986. Leif is going to sail somewhere around that period of time, maybe late 980s or early 990s. We don't have a firm grasp on exactly when he started moving around. Leif, there we go. So there are a few places that he names. One of them is the place full of really big flat rocks. But what's interesting is that he lands in a place that he calls Vinland, which is... Nope, you can't really tell where that is because I've zoomed in too much. Canada. This is before the time of Google Maps, absolutely. Absolutely before the time of Google Maps. And what's neat about this period of time is that over here in what is modern-day Newfoundland, we have this neat little place that we can't see because it's covered in snow. Can I choose a different period of time? Aha! There we go. So right here, at a place called, in French, L'Anse-Meadow, there's a permanent Viking settlement. And I said Viking again, so there's another dollar in the jar. Permanent Norse settlement here in Canada. And again, nope, wrong. Where's my, there it is. Canadian here, and I did not see any Vikings. Have you been here? That would be really neat if you had been here. I have some photos, by the way. So this is L'Anse-Meadows, and I can show you the actual site. Oop, nope. Oh, well, we could look at this map by itself, and this might actually help put things into perspective, just as we were. So we see here a color-coded expansion map of Scandinavian settlements across the countries. So the 8th century back in the 700s, again, we're mostly right here in the kind of tight-packed northern Scandinavian zone. By the 9th century or the 800s, we started moving out. We've moved over here to England and Iceland. By the 10th century, we've populated Iceland, and we've gotten over here to Greenland. And then by the 11th century, we are over here to Vinland, or North America. So also, all these little areas down here, which are going to be a fun stream or two when we finally get to that point in the AD period, and I can talk about all of the different Scandinavian kingdoms. I promise I'm not doing it on purpose. We can't really go anywhere anyway because of the COVID. So this is a site picture of the actual excavation. You can see that they had been recently digging. Here are the big squares, but you can see these outlines of the homes that they dug up. I can go wherever I want. I can't go anywhere because I have an American passport and they're not going to let me in. You just might not like it, and they yeah, they could arrest me, or they'd probably just cram me in quarantine for 2 weeks. Nope, I can't come in. Waiting until we get to Minnesota. We're getting to Minnesota. That's not going to be too far away. So this is a site picture of the excavation work, but they've actually built this guy, which is a recreation of the settlement itself, which is of course modern, but would have been built in the exact same style as the settlement and in the same proportions as the settlement, which you can go see. This is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. If you want to go up to this region, you are capable of doing so. And I would absolutely adore the opportunity to go up that way. It's just kind of hard to get to. Again, it's way out there. Way out there. And you kind of have to make your mind up that that's where you're wanting to go, because there's not too much else out that area. Right? Keep zooming out. So, I think there was a paragraph in our social studies textbook while in secondary school. Right. So you get a paragraph where you could have an entire great little few pages section of a chapter about exploration of the Norse to the New World. It looks like it might be puffin territory. If you can find puffins up there, that would be a nice justification to go, because I'd love to see a puffin. My wife, by the way, has been to Norway and Sweden and Denmark and Finland and has seen puffins and all of these neat little things that I have not seen, and I am rather jealous of her. Porgs! Yeah. Without the sad Mark Hamill. So, this is going to be a temporary thing, though. So, the Norse lived in Landsalmeadow for what appeared to be a couple of decades, probably not longer than 100 years, and eventually it just sort of fell off of their interest levels and their usage map. So they're not going to have a lasting impression, which is another reason why a lot of people didn't really give them the time of day. But by the 1960s, there had been enough excavation work going on at the location that they knew for a fact that Norse people lived there, that they had permanent settlements. The idea that is being sort of circulated today in historical, circles, is that this was a holdover place where you could go pull your boat up and get your boat repaired, which, of course, is a really important idea for the Norse people who are constantly kind of culturally attached to their longboats. Let's not say in Canada, 'tis a silly place. I don't know if they said that, but there were problems there. Leif Erikson's brother ended up getting killed by some native peoples in the region of North America. There were fights amongst and this is the Norse term, not my term, the red people. So these would be individuals that were not sort of the Inuit groups, because the Inuit and the Norse seem to have a fairly decent relationship with each other. But apparently there were problems with angry, bow-wielding native people that did not care for the Norse. This, of course, put a whole bunch of pressure on the settlement itself. The population was never very large, probably not more than about 200 individuals at the absolute maximum, and probably smaller than that in most cases. Vinland boat repairs for people blown off course. Ding! Right. So the history of the Norse people in Americas is going to kind of fall away for a little bit. And we're going to pick up in the 1500s. So about 500 years later. Of course, by the time we get to the 1500s, Europeans had discovered all of this. This is Columbus and the Portuguese and the rest of the Spanish and British colonization and Dutch colonization. And the Norwegians are still going to be able to find jobs on ships. They are well respected for their seafaring capabilities. And in some of these early colonies, especially colonies of the Dutch and colonies of the British, you're going to see some Norwegian people. And I'm going to start using the word Norwegian at this point because at that period of time, Denmark and Norway were unified into a kingdom, and they had what we would call identifiable boundaries and were kind of identified as an individual ethnic group. So they're going to be on cruise. When shipbuilding becomes a lucrative business in the New World, especially in the British and colonies of the Netherlands, here in what we would call the middle colonies in America, but places like modern day New York, New Jersey, when that shipbuilding industry becomes popular and when we start seeing early timber businesses pick up in the New World, especially in Canada and over here in this region, you're going to see some Norwegian people that get kind of brought over in the timber trade. New Amsterdam, correct. Place where Mr. Jones was staring at that yellow-haired girl. That's a reference to Counting Crows song. I don't know how many people got that or not, but I liked it. So, was down at the New Amsterdam, staring at that yellow-haired girl. Nobody? Okay. You got it and approved. Thanks, Mac in the Lab Coat. Anyway, so you're not going to see what we would call big migrations of Norwegian people during this period of time. You're not going to see people that are leaving Norway specifically to come to the New World. You're going to see small groups of people that are built into larger imperial movements. So you're going to see pockets of Norwegians in big coastal territories, places like Ottawa, places like New York City. I didn't really hear what you said. You're eating crunchy chips. That's fair enough. That's fair enough. Crunchy chips are great. I had some chips before I came on stream, hoping to sate some hunger issues. They're not holding up. I'm getting a bit peckish. I had a small lunch, and yeah, I could eat again. Such is a thing, though. Anyway, well, when do they actually start showing up in groups? There's going to be some political change over in the region, and this is mostly going to be centered in the early 1800s. So in the early 1800s, the 18 teens and 1820s, the Swedish country here are going to take over Norway. And they're going to pass these bills called the Acts of Union, and effectively Sweden is going to dominate Norwegian politics. Hold up your chips. I would really like some Tostitos, man. I haven't had Tostitos in a long, long time. I'm a pretty frugal individual, and paying an extra couple of dollars for Tostitos never really made enough sense to me. I can get the cheap off-brand chips for $1 a bag and be pleased with them, but I could do with some Tostitos. Well, there's something to add to the list, right? Anyway, I just had a whole moment where I was thinking about chips. I like food. Anyway, so when Sweden takes over Norway, there are a lot of people in Norway that don't care for this development. And there are a few things that start happening that are going to be catalysts for change. The first are some really unpopular laws. The Swedish are sort of in the driver's seat of the laws for Norway during this period of time, and they pass a lot of things that don't really go very well with the local Norwegian populations. Also, there are some religious differences. Sweden had been very, very Protestant for a long time by this point, several hundred years. And there were Protestants within Norway, but there were also Catholics still within Norway. Catholicism had held on in Norway for quite some time, mostly because the populations of Norway were never very high, and it's easier for areas to hold on to traditional practices when they don't have a lot of population force going on. So when the populations start rising, this is going to create religious tension as well. So, and this is not just between Protestants and Catholics. This is also between different branches of Protestantism. Lutherans versus Calvinists versus early Baptists and things of this nature. So there are some religious differences and political differences, and populations are growing And so we're going to start seeing groups of people from Norway that want to leave and look for a new place to go. And because the Norwegians already had contacts with both the British and the Dutch, they're going to start looking for the New World. And there's going to be sort of the first group of Norwegians that move over to the New World in 1825. And they're going to settle out in the western part of New York at a place called Kendal. Which is way out here. Weren't there also Buddhist statues found? Yes, that was in Sweden. In a Swedish longhouse, they found a statue of the Buddha, which almost certainly came from some sort of trade, because the Scandinavian people during that period of time were all over the world. And they had sailed all the way through the Mediterranean. They were over in Asia. They were in the Byzantine Empire. They were in northern Africa. But yeah, they had really big trade networks. They were also over in Central Asia with people like the Volga and the Kievan Rus. So the Scandinavian people spread a great deal during that 790 to about 1100 period of time. Was there much Islamic influence? Not much. We'll come back to Kendal. So there were Muslims along the borders, and there was a country over here, which is in modern day Ukraine. The capital of Ukraine is Kiev. There's a big kingdom of Slavic Viking intermarried individuals called the Kievan Rus, which is where Russia gets its modern name from. And they had a lot of dealings with people from Central Asia, especially this region over here. And in the late 1100s and early 1200s, there was a big group of Mongols called the Golden Horde, which had converted to Islam, that ended up destroying the Kievan Rus's kingdom and bringing it down. So there had been Mongol contact there had been Muslim contact with people that were of Scandinavian heritage, but it never really caught on because to those people, Islam was associated with the bad guys. So it was hard for that to ideologically kind of stick. There are pieces of evidence from Scandinavian people all over the world, though. During the early kind of proto-crusade period of time, down here in the Mediterranean, there were a group of people that were called the Varangian Guard, who were associated with the emperors of the Byzantine Empire. They were basically his personal bodyguard, but they were Scandinavians, these big, tall, strapping Scandinavian guys that ended up being hired on as mercenaries to protect the Byzantine king. They had also been responsible for carving up a lot of territory down here. For example, down here in Italy. Yeah, the Varangian Guard. Whoo, those guys. There were big Muslim incursions across the Mediterranean into places like Sicily and southern Italy. And a lot of these people hired Scandinavians to come fight to fight the Muslims for them. And these were ways that they made money. I mean, the Scandinavian people enjoyed fighting to begin with, and if they were going to get paid for it, there you are. But especially the Normans sort of settled in. There were a couple of kingdoms down there that didn't pay them. Instead, they gave them money, and then the Normans just started bringing over more and more and more and more and more people, and ended up settling up this whole kingdom down here in the southern part of Italy called the Kingdom of Two Sicilies, which was one of the larger kingdoms in Italy for a couple hundred years until they ran into a foul with the Holy Roman Empire, but that's a whole other series of streams. I can infinitely tangent, by the way. I can tangent forward in history, sideways in history, and backwards in history. So never ask a question worried that I'm going to go on a tangent. I'm just as likely to go on a tangent anyway. If you have questions, please do ask them. I enjoy this stuff. It's kind of my bag. So this first settlement, I'm an ambitangenter. I can't tangent left. I am not a Time Lord. If I were a Time Lord, I would. I don't know. I would have cooler stuff. I'm not from Gallifrey. I don't have two hearts. Anyway, so over here in Kendall, this is going to be one of the first kind of Norwegian colony cities in the New World. And they're going to be associated with the Quaker group. So in this area over here, especially in Pennsylvania and Western New York, there were a lot of people that had left Europe looking for true religious freedom. People like Quakers, people like these Norwegians who were looking to get out and celebrate their Christian faith in their own way. And because of these associations of kind of being the cast-off groups, they're going to find a lot of common heritage and common practice with these people. And you're going to start seeing steady, almost yearly groups of Norwegians coming to the New World by the 1830s. And they're going to begin moving mostly around the coastlines of the Great Lakes here. So this region right here is what we refer to geographically as the Great Lakes area. And they're going to stay along these coastlines. And partially this is because of shipping trades, because even at that point in time, there were a lot of Norwegian ship makers, but also the similar concepts of fishing, which are big parts of their diet, still relied on fish. And also similar climates, which are, cozy to these people. If you come from an area that's like this, you want to go to an area that's more or less like this temperately. Also timber. They're still very much involved in the timber industry, which is kind of flourishing in the New World around this time. I should say the United States at this point. It's not really referred to at that point as the New World. But you get what I'm saying. Kelly Howlett's... Oh my goodness. Thanks for the raid. I am very upset at my raid alerts. This is the second time I have received a raid and my raid alert did not go off. I am a little bit upset about that. Let me go see what the devil is going on. And I can tell you what I'll do, Kelly. I'll just randomly make it go through. Is that not why you're... Thank you for the raid, Kelly. How was your stream? What was going on in the Kelly Howlett stream today? For those of you that don't know, Kelly Howlett, art streamer, teaches art for a living and has a stream usually Friday and Saturday afternoons. You should go hang out. She's cool. And we're about... your timing is almost perfect, Kelly. You came in right when we're about to start talking about Wisconsin. Yeah, Kelly's great. Very cool stream, plays good music. You never know what you're going to end up with on a Kelly stream. You're trying to draw a dream. Oh, I love Sandman. Oh, if you have photos and you want to share those, please do. Post them on whatever you would like and share Instagram links. Any of you all that do streaming stuff, by the way, you have my explicit stated permission. If you want to share Instagram links or links to your stuff, you are welcome to. If you are here, you are friends, you share your stuff. And everybody go follow everybody else. Yeah, absolutely. Do your thing. I would not say it if I didn't mean it. So, you do your thing. I really am irked by this alert box situation. The follow thing works, and the all of the other stuff works, but apparently not the raid alert, which is just strange. I don't like it. So Kelly and viewers, and welcome to all of our friends from Kelly's stream. I did not say hello to you all, so I hope you all are doing well. We are talking about the history of the Norse and the Norwegian people in the New World. We have kind of left behind the Norse, and now we're on the Norwegians. So we just talked about people moving in from Norway in the early 1800s, around 1825, and now by the time that we are to the 1830s, we are moving along the coastline. And they're going to start settling over here in this region, which is Illinois and southern Wisconsin. So right around here, there's going to be a big concentration of Norwegian people. Okay, let's go check out Destiny's art here. Oh wow, this is lovely. I hope everybody is clicking on the link that was just shared and going to look. Very nice. I am a sucker for nature scenes like that. Very nice. Thank you for sharing. That looks great. That's good stuff. Okay. Always nice to have a bit of a cultural interlude where we can go look at pretty things. Because, I mean, really, you're usually just having to look at me. Yeah, no problem. Absolutely. So we get to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin is especially going to be important for population centers. And by the time we get to the middle 1800s, so around, the 40s, 50s, and 60s, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on over in Europe. So everybody knows about the potato famine, the much joked about potato famine in Europe. This is actually a pretty big cultural issue that brings a lot of people from Europe over to America. The potato famine happens in 1840. This is also going to affect people from Norway who are going to come over in pretty big groups to the United States. There's also a famine specifically in Scandinavia in 1866. It lasts for a couple of years, from 66 to 68. And this is going to push a lot of Norwegian people from the area to the United States. And again, especially to places like Wisconsin. Potatoes. Boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew. And also the Industrial Revolution. Because with industrialization happening, people are being pushed off of traditional farmlands by machinery, and a lot of those people are looking for a place to go where they can find land and where they can find hope for their families, and that's going to bring them to, you guessed it, the United States, where land is plentiful. And there are lots of really good documents that you can go back and sort through, especially when we get to big land grant periods of time in the 40s and 50s where the United States government is selling land or even giving away land in certain areas. You can find these registrations and you can see all of the Norwegian names because you can just tell by looking at them that they are Norwegian, right? Thanks, Shane Wise. Land is plentiful and cheap, exactly. And there are going to be big concentrations of these people, and they're going to begin identifying with their local American people. And during the United States Civil War, there's actually going to be a group in Wisconsin. The 15th Regiment from Wisconsin is referred to as the Norwegians, because guess what? They're mostly Norwegian. And I think that sometimes, okay, so I should pause here and just tell you, usually when I prep for streams, I kind of sit down and think for a little while about kind of the goal that I want to cover and how I want to organize stuff. And then I type myself an outline, which is, just kind of basic. I want to make sure that I hit this point. And if I need to go look up a specific date to confirm when stuff happens, I'll do that. I can remember lots of dates, but I can't remember all of the dates. Huge campaign from Canada towards immigration, posters on advertisement. There we go. Yep. Would these new waves of migrants have had contact with some of the original Norse settlers? Yes, they would have. But by this point in time, there were enough Europeans and enough European settlers in the big cities that the original pockets of Norwegian settlers would have been really heavily overrun. So you wouldn't go to a city like New York and find Little Norway or Little Oslo or anything like that. There were not concentrated population sizes enough to have unique kind of sub-communities in the big cities. The biggest one that existed around this time was probably in either Minneapolis or in Chicago. And most of the people that were coming over were kind of filtering through the existing migrant networks and getting out to places like Wisconsin, Minnesota, North and South Dakota, where they could find land. There weren't as many family links as it seems because, again, prior to about the early 1800s, there wasn't really a family-oriented migration. The people that were in the New World from the 15, 16, 1700s that were Norwegian were usually Norwegian young bachelors who had pitched in to work. Maybe they were going to sign up for a period of time on a ship and do some sailing and make a little bit of a living for themselves, and then maybe buy something in a coastal city in the United States. But they really weren't bringing whole family units over most times. That really didn't start happening until the 1820s. So this had really only been about 30 or so years after you start seeing the first families show up, and the population density just really wasn't heavily enough concentrated to have some sort of, like I said, Little Norway. But what's neat, and I was trying to get to this kind of theory. So once I get my outline set up, I go and try to find photographs, which I think add a lot to the overall discussion, because people like to see things, right? And I know I can reference things down here on the map. The map is right there. I know I can reference the map and do stuff like that, but the photographs that I go look for, I hope add a level of interest. And I'm leading up to something, and I'm kind of burying the lead. I found a really great photograph, and I only found it today. Actually, not too terribly long ago, or just a few hours earlier ago. I found a great photo, and I want to share it with you all. This is a pretty big find for me, because how frequently do you see stuff like this? But this is a photo of the 15th Wisconsin Regiment, aka the Norwegians. And you can see here in the corner, they've got themselves a big old Norwegian flag. And to me, this was such a lucky find, because photographs at that point were very rare and they were very expensive. And to be completely fair, this was at a reunion of the regiment after the Civil War had ended. But this is actually the 15th Wisconsin Norwegian Regiment, as they would have marched when they were fighting in the American Civil War. So this really tickled me pink. I was very excited to find this photograph. Really, really cool. So I think that was neat. And by the time we get to the 1860s, the region is becoming more Norwegian. And places like Wisconsin and Minnesota and the Dakotas here are going to be the targets for big groups here. And when I say big groups, I do mean big groups where you would have several hundred migrants showing up at one time. And at that point, this region was very heavily considered Norwegian. And this is when they start doing the stuff like Vern is referencing, making cheese and bringing with them all of their cultural stuff. There are breweries that get set up here that are run by Norwegians. There are timber companies and shipbuilding companies still on the Great Lakes that are run by Norwegians. Big fishing expeditions into the Great Lakes run by Norwegian people. And one of the more important cities that sort of becomes kind of the heartland of Norwegians in the region is Minneapolis. And it still is really important. In Minneapolis, there are a lot of cultural celebrations still of Norwegian heritage. So by the time we get to the late 1800s, this population in the New World is actually going to take on a pretty important role for people over in the Old World. Because by the time you get to the 1860s and 70s, there are some pretty big movements over here to get Norway independent from Sweden. And the local Norwegians in Norway were pushing for this. But what's interesting is that at this point, by about 1900 or so, there were 1 million Norwegians in the United States. So you have all of these people over in the United States that are industrious, they're making a living for themselves, and they're taking that money and they're actually sending it back home. And inside Norway, they're sending money to militias that are specifically designated rifling clubs, but we all know what that is. Just in case Sweden wanted to get angry. They wanted to have militias put in place inside of their home country that could protect Norwegian interests. But they were also sending donations to Norwegian political parties in the late 1800s, and especially democratic parties that wanted to push out the Swedish people and establish Norwegian independence. This is so interesting. Your hubby's Norwegian Fandel sent it in Minneapolis. There we go. So now we have the link, because now we have literally taken history and brought it to someone's own life right now. And I love it when we can do that, because this is another one of the things that I really like to focus on in my streams, is that we live in a world that can't forget this stuff, because we're all still related to this, and everybody has their own story that goes back just beyond their parents and grandparents. It goes all the way back through time, and if we go back far enough, we're all the same, right? Okay, Kelly, let's check out some Instagram. Dream. Yes. Everybody go look at Kelly's Instagram. I do love me some Sandman. One of my favorite comic books ever. I think Neil Gaiman is a genius. And I'm not saying that just like, oh, that guy's a genius. Like, I for real mean that. I dig it. And if you are so inclined, scroll down a little bit and you see this really neat picture of a painted cassette. That is mine, and I own that because Kelly sent it to me. She's working on postcard campaigns, and you go hang out in her chat. You never know. She might send you a postcard. So go hang out when she streams. Thank you, Kelly, for sharing that. I think it's delightful. I do also love the otters. You can't go wrong with otters, right? So. And Kelly, by the way, also from Wisconsin. So here's another link. These people are trying to help their homeland. And this is actually going to be really important to the overall Norwegian independence movement, because the people inside of Norway had been sort of treated as secondary citizens by the Swedish for quite some time. And they're going to end up relying to a certain extent on movement from the United States. Not only do the Norwegians in the United States send money back home, they also lobby the United States government. They form citizens groups within the United States, and they send letters to senators, to congressional members, and to the president. At the time, the president was Theodore Roosevelt. And they write directly to these individuals saying, you should recognize Norway as an independent nation. At the time, the Americas were much more interested in Asian goings-on than European goings-on. And unfortunately, Roosevelt pretty much ignored them, which doesn't mean to say that it was a wasted effort. I think it's amazing and really cool stuff. So again, by about 1900... or 1905 or 1910, sad Viking noises. You've got over 1 million Norwegians living in the United States. Norway does become independent again, of course, as it is today. And there are more people still coming. So if we kind of fast forward to today, oh man, oh, hey guys, I could be famous. Check it out. If I click on little link right there, I can go to bigfollows.com and I can be famous. No, don't delete them. I want to be famous. I want to be famous. Oh, you sad spammer bot. Don't make my husband famous. Why don't you want me to be famous? That dude's name was Pokemon. I love Pokemon. I want to be infamous. I just want everybody to love everybody. I don't really care if I'm famous or not. If people hang out and have a good time, that's enough for me, right? So what are we looking at today? If we look at the United States today, no, not Shane the Impaler. Unless I'm impaling ignorance with knowledge. And doing so in a nice way, not an offensive or violent way. Shane the Terrible? I don't want to strike terror into people's hearts. Oh, we're getting a puppy visit. The extra paler? Now, I resemble that one. Hello, Kaylee. You guys want to see the puppy? I'm being graced by puppy slobbers. Here's the puppy. Hello, come on. Come on. Hello, Kaylee. Hello. Where are you going? What are you doing? You want to... Oh my goodness, so much sugar. Okay. You want to see the camera? Oh, get camera sugars. Now I've got puppy slobber on the lens. Let me see if I can... Sorry. Okay. Oh yes, the puppy. She was out in the yard earlier running around. Did she do something guilty? No. She's just a big baby. You want to come back up here? Do you love your audience? Come on. Come and see me. Come on. No. No. Just going to sit. Why are you pouting? Huh? Why are you pouting? Oh, puppy, do you want me to scratch your hiney? Oh, you're too far away. She loves it when she gets her back scratched. What? What? I'm streaming. I can't come play right now. I'm streaming. I'm just about through. Maybe we'll go throw the ball in the yard or something. She's probably hungry. She did not eat her breakfast. Well, it's almost time for puppy dinners, so that will not be too long. Okay, so what about Norse people and Norwegian people today? So right now, based on recent census data that I was able to find, there are somewhere around 5.5 or so million people of Norwegian descent in the United States today. They are still mostly settled around the the Midwest region, places like North and South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, some into Illinois. But there are also populations over in the Seattle region and up in Alaska. How many people currently live in Norway? That is a question I don't know. Let me go to the magic Google box. Population of Norway, about 5.328 million. So there are almost as many people that are of Norwegian descent in the United States as there are people in Norway, and perhaps even a little bit more. Do they travel to the west and end up in Alaska for the gold rush? Yes, they do. They also go over to Seattle, where there is, as you might expect, extensive shipping and timber and fishing, where that seems to be the way that they go in. Your husband is a Seattle Norwegian. There we go. See, now we're bringing it to today. The western expansion all the way out to that part of the country doesn't really start until the early 1900s and carries through until that whole region gets more or less urbanized and settled the way that it is today. But there are big populations out in Seattle. So I am loving all of the personal links of this today. This is making me very happy. I love the fact that history is alive and we hang around with each other. That's when his family came in. So there we go. There we go. I love it when this happens because human beings are so much cooler than we give ourselves credit for. We have too big of an opinion of our intellect sometimes and we get into trouble, but we have to also remember our history, right? We're all part of this together. And we're all on the same little marble floating around through space together, right? And it's important to remember that and know where we came from and not use that to hate everybody else, but use that to recognize that if we go a little bit further back, we're all the same, right? That's the message. And that is all for me today. But that doesn't mean that the stream has to be over. Doesn't mean that we have to leave right now. Your mother's side are both from Nottingham, which was a Viking settlement. There we go. Happy hands. Have you done a session explaining the French exploration and settlement in eastern Canada and the Acadians, eventually leading to the Cajuns? I have not. I am familiar with the Cajun extract, those people that were unloyal to the king. Dun, 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 dun. Thank you, Exhibit Scotland, and welcome to the adventure. Hope you're having a great one. I have not led to the Acadians yet. That's something that we could do, though. Next time we have a viewer request poll, you would be welcome to throw that one into the hat and see. I know a lot about that group because my mother was raised in New Orleans, where, of course, a lot of Cajun culture is kind of put together. Interesting stream. Good effort. Thanks very much. Hope you're having a little bit of a good time. History doesn't have to be so boring, right? Okay, so again, that's all for me. That's all that I had to say. But if you look below you, remember that you have all sorts of options to spend those sweet, sweet adventure points on. You can ask for stuff. You can do all kinds of things. While you are doing that, I'm going to see if there's anyone that we might raid. What's in the news? Tim the Toolman Taylor. Do you specifically want the part of Tim the Toolman Taylor? Or do you want me to stick my finger in an electrical outlet and fry myself? What's in the news with Ethiopia? Oh, okay. Yeah. And we might go see Justin. Steve Sketches is up too. Haven't rated Steve in some time. Okay, so there is inside Ethiopia a problem with a group of people in a region called Tigray. You want the electrifying impression? I don't know if I really want to stick my finger in a light socket and get electrified. I don't think that's going to be beneficial to my long-term life. I might die from that. So I might give you the or the more power, and you'll just have to kind of deal with that. So there's a region called Tigray, and it's inside of Ethiopia. Let me go over here to Ethiopia. Ethiopia. Capital is Addis Ababa. Okay. So up here in the north, there's a region called Tigray. And back in I think it's the late 70s or the mid 70s, there was a group of people in this area that formed a resistance group called the Tigray People's Liberation Front. And they were pretty much against the whole concept of the Egyptian government existing as it did. They weren't a fan of the ruling political party inside of Ethiopia. And what ended up happening is that the Ethiopian government kind of went up into this region and more or less tried to wipe them out. This is a really big kind of war that happened over the course of the 70s and then the 80s and even into the early 1990s. And the people up in that region are a different ethnic group, which is very common in Africa. There are more individual recognized ethnic groups and linguistic groups inside of Africa than there are anywhere else in the world. And especially in these regions right now, there are a lot of ethnic and regional differences. For information, the neighbor finally turned off the leaf blower. Oh, man. Our neighbors have been doing yard work all day, and they had a leaf blower running for about an hour prior to me streaming, and I've now been streaming for about an hour and 44 minutes. So they have been running this leaf blower for almost 3 hours. Yeah, the Caucasus is another region, and one of the last times we talked about stuff in the news, we were talking about the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So the problem that's happening right now has a lot to do with the unrest that was going on back in the 80s, and especially after 91, when the Communist Party in Ethiopia lost its big connection with the Soviet Union. There's going to be a big argument up in Tigray about whether or not communism should be allowed to continue, whether or not they should outlaw that party. And in 91, there's actually a coup where the legitimate government of Ethiopia was overthrown by some of these people. They eventually took back over, and since then, again, there's been a lot of arguments going on. So, in the most recent conflicts, they were supposed to have some elections earlier in the year, but there were signs that some of the people that were really strongly against the government from Addis Ababa were going to get into politics and get elected by these people. And the government of Ethiopia decided that they were going to cancel the elections. And they said that they canceled the elections because of COVID. And they said, look, we can't have elections right now. If we have everybody bunch up, it's going to cause problems. It's going to spread COVID. But of course, the people up in Tigray are going to we're going to see that as a way for the government in Addis Ababa to shut down their democratic voice. And so there are going to be some pretty big backlashes against this. There's going to be a lot of calls for the elections to go through. There are going to be a lot of calls for the Ethiopians to once again kind of back out of this area because the government still keeps a pretty heavy military presence up in this region. And there's going to be an attack on one of the Ethiopian government military bases back in not too long ago, just a couple of, maybe, I can't remember if it was at the beginning of last week or the middle of last week. anyway, not so long ago, just a few days ago, there was an attack where one of the military bases kind of got shot up a lot. And of course, the Ethiopian government is then going to respond with big old honking military stuff. And they're going to be flying planes over. And just a couple of days ago, they targeted some strategic locations within the region. They targeted an airport and some places that were suspected to have some military hardware stashes. And in response, the Tigray People's Liberation Front were going to, and this just happened just a couple of days ago, as a response, they're going to kill a whole bunch of civilians. And of course, they're not going to directly claim credit for it, but they're going to say, oh, like, if you would just get out of our way and leave us alone, people wouldn't die like this. Which nations back Ethiopia these days? Most of the countries in the world are going to recognize the official Ethiopian government. There are some... The region itself is somewhat tumultuous just to begin with. This country right here is called Eritrea. And in the Tigray region, let me see if I can actually zoom in and see if it will pop up that as a state. Yeah, there we go. So this region right here, I don't know how well you can see it. This is the Tigray region, and it borders both Eritrea here and South Sudan over here. And so Ethiopia overall is a Christianized country, but that region in particular also has a lot of Muslim settlers that feel as if they identify better with people in Eritrea or even people over in South Sudan. So they want the ability to either self-govern or leave Ethiopia and join other countries as a way of annexation. But most of the countries on Earth are going to back the kind of official Ethiopian government. And the people that are taking this up in the UN are having to deal with representatives from the Tigray region, but also from the central government in Addis Ababa. So the problem is a lot bigger than just, do these people get to, govern themselves? It also has a lot of historical strings that go way back to, early Christianization movements, early introduction of Islam into the area. And they want to be either independent or join with another predominantly more Muslim leadership group, or even other parts of Ethiopia that are Christian that would give them better independent working terms. This has Cold War ties back when, communism and democracy were kind of at odds with each other. So that's what's going on in Ethiopia. What's going on in the news? That's what's going on in the news. Okie dokie. And that is a quickly developing problem. I suspect that next week we're either going to see really big atrocities, bigger than even the one that happened this most recent week, or we're going to have some internationally organized ceasefire. But that's a flashpoint that could turn really, really ugly, even uglier than it is right now, very, very quickly. But that's a good one. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody got any questions or thoughts or anything of that nature? Okay. I think we're going to go raid Steve Sketches. We have not raided Steve Sketches in quite some time. Cool guy. Great artist. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the old raid button here. Thank you all for coming by. Thank you so much for hanging out. Hope everybody enjoyed this. Joey, I hope that you feel as if your 10K points were spent well. For those of you that don't know, when we go into a raid, we yell, "Adventure!" and then throw as many of our little adventure hats into the chat as possible. Our next scheduled stream is going to be Thursday night. 1900 hours Central Standard Time. And I hope everybody has a good rest of the weekend. And I hope everybody has a good start to the week next week. And I will see you all around the bend. So I'm going to hit the outro screen for just a second. We're going to go raid Steve. And no, thank you, Becca. I hope that this was everything that you dreamed that it could be. I hope I lived up to the hype. So I will see you all next time around. Be kind to each other. Love everybody. See you next time.